So welcome to the end of quarter 3 of 2024. Not technically the end. We got one more day here in September. Tomorrow, that will be the official end of the third quarter. Here in Central Florida, you can just sort of feel the nip, if you will, in the air. Maybe not. Maybe that was just rain this past week with the tropical storm that passed through. Boy, those are never, ever fun. That is for sure. Certainly a lot of headlines this past week here locally. You know, the other interesting term that I heard this past week, which also has sort of a weather type of theme to it, was the term maturity tsunami. Okay, maturity tsunami. And so I saw this and so I was like, oh, that's kind of, interesting. And so we thought we would share with you what exactly that concept is. And only appropriate to, I guess, start the conversation there on this week's episode of Dollars and Cents, given that we just kind of got through the hurricane this past week of sorts. So let's turn our attention to exactly what that maturity tsunami is and what it means for you. There'll be some interesting things to talk about. Also on the program, we're going to talk about a look at how complicated your taxes are going to get in the future. And that one is regardless of what happens in the presidential election. Look for your taxes to get more complicated, and we'll explain what that is and how you might be able to try and tackle that very issue. And then how to plan for retirement if you're kind of getting to middle age and feeling behind the 8 ball. So that's what we're going to be talking about on the program here on this week's episode of Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, coming to you on a host of channels throughout the Central Florida region. Also a top 25 financial planning podcast as well. So make sure you check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Any trouble finding us on your preferred channel, go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. There you'll see some icons. Click on them. They'll immediately connect you over to our channel on that particular platform, including our YouTube channel as well. My name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary with Nelson Financial Planning, where we've got a team of great folks who stand ready, willing, and able to help you improve your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. Speaking of Nelson Financial Planning, we are going to ask for your vote. Only appropriate that during election time that we, just like every other Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, are asking for your vote. We are asking for your vote because, once again, this year, Nelson Financial Planning, was nominated as Best Financial Planner for the Best of Winter Park event hosted by the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce. So if you go to the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce website, you can vote. You can vote every day for us if you would like. Voting ends on October the 11th. So once again, Nelson Financial Planning nominated as Best Financial Planner for Best of Winter Park, hosted by the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce. So make sure you vote for us. Right? I got to get into the action. It's an election year, so I'm going to ask for your vote too. But in this case, it probably isn't quite as significant as the presidential or Congress or Senate, but hey, whatever. Maybe even more interesting than the chaosness that we'll unfortunately see in Washington going forward. But anyway, I digress. We'll shift gears back to maturity tsunami. What is it? What does it mean? Here's the statistic that's sort of driving that expression of the maturity tsunami. So by next month, and here we are at the end of September, so it's not far, $950 billion in certificates of deposits will be maturing And over the next 12 months, a total of $2.5 trillion is going to be maturing, because as we know, how a certificate of deposit works is when you buy a certificate of deposit, right, there's usually a time period. So it's a 6-month CD, a 12-month CD, 18-month CD, whatever the case may be. At the end of that period of time, then the deal's done. That's how a CD works. It's a timed deposit so that for that set time period, you get whatever the interest rate was that you were quoted on that particular product. So what's interesting about that, or where this kind of comes into play in terms of your investments and your returns, is that a lot of people moved money into CDs about a year or so ago when rates were peaking, and CDs, particularly one-year CDs, had very high rates relative to like savings or money markets or things like that. But when CDs run their period of time, so if you bought a 12-month CD 12 months ago, then it's up for maturity. And that's this maturity tsunami that we're talking about, where a total of $2.5 trillion is going to be coming to the end of the road, or coming to the end of the time on these certificate deposits, $2.5 trillion over the course of the next 12 months. And now, right, because the Fed has started cutting rates, then you're not going to get the same return or the same yield on that CD as what you were able to acquire 12 months ago. So that is a classic example in sort of investment parlance of reinvestment risk. Okay, so reinvestment risk occurs when your bond or your fixed duration investment or the time period on your CD comes to an end, right? It ends because the yield that you were getting was only available during that particular time frame. When the time period frame ends, then you've got to re-up. And where that reinvestment risk comes into play then is that when your interest rates have fallen, then you're not going to be able to reinvest that money and make the same return, or make as good of a return as you previously did when you had that original investment. And this is particularly true, I think, even more when we start to think about CDs, which are bank issued. Probably about a quarter of all CDs are issued by 4 major national banks. As you might well imagine, they tend to offer lower rates anyway, and because they have the market share, and because of these automatic rollovers when you're talking about CDs, then oftentimes they don't really have an incentive to give you the best possible rate. So that's the thing about CDs, is if they're maturing, you really only do get sort of a narrow window, usually a week or maybe 10 days, where you've got to do something. Otherwise, it could very easily automatically renew into another product that at the end of the day winds up being at a lower interest rate than what you had previously. So bottom line on all of this, folks, really don't be caught up in this maturity tsunami. It's probably worse than a hurricane when you think of it, because if you're asleep at the wallet, so to speak, and your CD matures and renews automatically, you may find that, wait a minute, this isn't the same rate that I had. This is a lesser rate than what I had before. And so ultimately, make sure that you are really considering all of your options, whether it's looking at putting that money in a savings account or a money market account, maybe another CD, but also consider the investment themes that we were talking about on this program last week. Those 4 investment themes might also be an alternative for what to do with this money. So make sure you don't get caught up in this maturity tsunami that's happening out there, particularly when it relates to CDs. We're going to take a break and return after these messages here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. So, taxes. A lot of the conversation, particularly as we are sitting in the middle of a political year where we have a presidential election coming up in, not long at all, like 5 weeks or something like that. I mean, pretty soon. And so we thought what we would do a little bit here in this segment is maybe talk about taxes a little bit. And I certainly think it's safe to say with an upcoming election that there's going to be changes, no matter how you look at it. And whether you're Team Harris or Team Trump, we definitely are about ready to see a lot of changes in the current tax code, regardless of who gets elected. A lot of the current tax laws that we've seen go back to the last major tax legislation that actually passed in 2017. All of that sunsets next year, end of next year. And so there's going to be a lot of conversation about that over the course of the next 15 months. And obviously where that conversation goes is going to be directly dependent upon what the balance of power is in Washington after November. Remember, there's sort of three different bodies, if you will, that a law has to get through. And I think right now everybody's obviously focusing on presidential election, but let's not forget every single member of the House of Representatives, which is where bills start. Remember that old little cartoon of how a bill becomes a law kind of thing? Starts in the House, right? Every member of that body is also up for re-election, as they are each and every 2 years. And then a third of the Senate is up for re-election, as that is every 2 years. And then, of course, presidency every 4 years. So it's important to look at kind of what happens all three, right? Because it's one thing for one part of that three to say, oh, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And, well, you kind of need the other two in order to make it law. So a lot of these conversations that we're hearing really do underscore that there will be a number of changes that will play out simply because you have such a big monumental expiration of tax rates that is set to automatically occur at the end of next year. And if they don't do something, then across the board for every single American, their taxes are going to go up because these tax rates that are going to expire at the end of next year ultimately lowered tax rates across the board for all income levels. So you're definitely going to see something on the tax side over the course of the next 15 months. And the problem is that I don't know if it's going to make our lives simpler. It is amazing to me how complicated the tax code is. Here's the latest statistics on this. Individuals and businesses will spend nearly 8 billion hours and over $130 billion in out-of-pocket expenses just trying to comply with the federal tax code. Stop and think about that. 8 billion hours, 130 odd billion in compliance costs. And we're not talking about the taxes. We're talking about just the cost of compliance. So much to talk about as it relates to this particular topic. So welcome on in to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. One of Central Florida's longest running radio programs, also a top 25 financial planning podcast on the World Wide Web. My name is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, where we got a team of certified financial fiduciaries that stand ready to help you improve your life with a successful and cost-effective financial plan. So here's the disturbing statistics from 1994 to 2021. So basically a 25-year period of time. The tax code has grown in length by 40% to about 4 million words. Now, here we are in a presidential election season. Both candidates, Harris and Trump are looking at changes to the child tax credit. I heard them, both sides, talk about expanding the child tax credits. And also both sides have talked about not potentially taxing tips. Both sides have also talked about different ways in which Social Security might not be as taxable as it currently is. And they both have some conversations about business credits, small business credits, and all of those kinds of things. And then toss in the expiring tax rates at the end of 2025. And you certainly are going to see a sea of changes in the tax code. But as you might well imagine, that doesn't necessarily translate to reduced compliance burdens. Because see, what happens in Washington, and we see this time and time again, is that lawmakers, which has directly contributed to the complexity of the tax code, they use the tax code to try and influence behaviors, to try and drive growth in certain areas. Maybe it's even to spur economic activity in their very own state. Some of the many examples that you see for that, chief among them comes with some of the credits that you get for purchasing electric vehicles, or tax deferrals, the tax deferrals that you get for saving for retirement, and some of the tax credits that you get for installing solar panels or new doors. I mean, there's just a litany of these throughout the tax code, which ultimately contributes to its complexity, because as those get added into the mix, then there's different rules, different requirements, right? So if you've got a certain type of product that's going to get a certain type of credit, well, then congratulations, you've just expanded the tax code to ultimately address that. So, and during history, there's been some cases where the tax code has been somewhat simplified, probably the biggest of which was in 1986, which was the Tax Reform Act. That was a big change during the Reagan administration. Also in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act nearly doubled the standard deduction. So in a way that did simplify things, because when you're itemizing your deductions, well, then it takes a lot longer than just choosing the default option that is a standard deduction. Now, as with anything, any tax change is not perfect, because when that big change happened to the standard deduction back in 2017, it ultimately eliminated some of the ways in which people could write off expenses. Among them, casualty or theft losses was eliminated as a potential deduction. Unreimbursed employee expenses was another one that was eliminated back in those days. So it's one of those things where, if you do something over here, then chances are something over here is going to happen as well. So that produces a lot of changes across the board. But that change that doubled up the standard deduction, eliminated the personal exemptions, pushed everybody, or nearly everybody, over 90% now ultimately uses that standard deduction. So you can certainly see where there have been times where there are simplifications of the tax code. I hope we're maybe on the cusp of another one. I'm not sure that I'm convinced of that. The reality is that the bottom line when it comes to your taxes is that, unfortunately, more and more we see that folks need to use a tax professional to complete their federal income taxes. We see many instances, as we're doing our own tax preparation work for our clients, which is something that we do at Nelson Financial Planning, that there's just constantly mistakes that get made, things that get missed, opportunities that don't get taken advantage of, which is certainly very important. So as we reflect on the political season, as we reflect on the conversation about taxes, expect there to be a lot of tax changes over the course of the next 12 to 15 months. What those are going to be really more of a function of what happens in not just the White House, but also Congress, the House, and the Senate. So make sure you stay tuned with us as we keep you updated on that. Or you can check out our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. Chapter 16 has a good summary on taxes as well. But bottom line, make sure you're seeking professional and expert guidance on your taxes. With that, we'll take a break and return after these messages here on Dollars and Cents. So are you feeling unprepared for retirement? Hopefully you weren't unprepared for this past week's hurricane here in Central Florida, or more specifically in the panhandle of Florida. This segment is designed to help you feel better, maybe, hopefully, by giving you some useful tips to get jump-started if you are feeling unprepared for retirement. Here's just the statistic that it takes a little bit of time to wrap your hands around, but it underscores how dire the situation may be for many people in middle age. According to the folks at Vanguard, workers between the ages of 45 and 54, so that's considered middle age. Sadly, I am now finding myself on the upper end of that age range. I don't know what that means then. What comes next? Anyway, median account balance of $60,000 in their 401k, well below the rule of thumb. Man, that really is bothering me. If the statistic out of Vanguard says 45 to 54 is middle age, I'm on the upper end of that. Where does that put me? Anyway, where am I? Well, if you're between those ages, the average balance, $60,000 in 401k, that is well below the rule of thumb, if you will, target that at age 50, you should have saved about 6 times your salary. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to give you sort of a 3-step program, if you will, here in this segment that hopefully helps you get back on track. So welcome on into Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. Be sure to check us out on our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. Maybe you were listening to that prior segment where we were talking about expect a lot of tax changes over the course of the next year or so, regardless of who wins the presidency, and the importance of seeking professional guidance. Well, we've been helping our clients with their taxes and, in fact, preparing tax returns at Nelson Financial Planning for over 20 years now, and goes hand in hand with our long-standing history and celebrating our 40th anniversary earlier this year, but certainly been doing taxes for a while, and we would certainly highlight the need to have expert tax guidance, particularly as it relates to your investments, particularly as it relates to your retirement. My name is Joel Garris. So if you're interested in that, to finish that thought, at the end of the day, I see I'm all thrown off on this middle age thing and being on the upper end of the age range here. It's just shocking. It happens slowly, but then all of a sudden. And so if you're interested in having a conversation with a professional, then visit our website, Nelson Financial Planning. There you can schedule an absolutely free consultation to review your retirement. My name is Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning. So, look, we get it. That's a tough stat, right? 45 to 54, that age group, the average 401k balance is $60,000. 45 to 54, chances you're probably in a little bit of a tough spot. You may find yourself with kids in or nearing college, so there's a cost there. You may also find yourself, on the other hand, having to deal with aging parents, all of which costs money. So those are some tough spots, tough ages to be in. Kind of you're the filling in the Oreo cookie, except you're not really having any fun. Well, we've got a 3-step process in this segment of the program to really kind of help give you some perspective. So step 1, start with something, anything, and start today. Look, every day is one less day. There is still time, even if you're in that 45 to 54 range, there is still time to prepare for retirement. And in fact, there's some opportunities to prepare even better, because if you're over age 50, you can in fact contribute more money to things like IRAs or Roths or 401ks or 403bs. The contribution limits, in fact, once you are over age 50, actually increase quite a bit, giving you the opportunity to save more money, giving you the opportunity to kind of get back on track. But it really does require that you start with something. You start with anything, and you got to start today. The reality is, one of the best suggestions we often give folks is to take that next pay increase and pretend it didn't happen. Take all of that and redirect that into that employer plan. Make sure you're getting all the match, right? If the employer's giving you a match, that's free money. You'd be surprised at the number of times we have this conversation and people aren't doing that. They're leaving money on the table. So in terms of trying to catch up for retirement and accumulate more money in a short fashion, well, my goodness, isn't a better alternative to get the employer's match in its entirety, right? So you've got to make sure you're doing that. And then this is where the conversation about pre-tax, when you're making those contributions, do you do them pre-tax or do you do them after tax? The reality is that if you make those contributions on a pre-tax basis, then as the name suggests, then you're going to experience some tax savings. As a result of that, that helps to fund the amount that you're able to contribute. So if you're doing that on a pre-tax basis, in essence, the tax savings helps to offset or helps to pay for some of those contributions that you are doing on a regular basis. So important to be able to ultimately think about, if I do it on a pre-tax basis, then I'm going to actually get some funding along the way to help pay for those contributions, or to help cover those contributions in a way that doesn't impact my overall income as much as it would. Now, if you've got the extra money and you want to do it on an after-tax basis, that's the Roth side of the equation, and many employer plans now have that as an option. But just know that if you do it on a pre-tax, that might really help you get started. It might help you get started and contribute ultimately more, because you pick up that tax savings, which then allows you to save a little bit more today. And if you're looking to get started and start with anything, then there's a value to that. So that's number one. Number two, figure out where you really are now. Do a financial assessment. Look at what you own, what you owe, and what the income is versus the expenses. Are there some higher interest rates on some of the stuff that you owe? As you look at the expenses, do you have some spending habit issues that you could certainly improve? Maybe it's just those subscriptions that you sign up for and they just keep coming every single month, whether you use them or not. You may find that you've got more subscriptions than you realize, and so that gives you opportunities for areas of improvement and places that you can cut. You know, many times when we sit and talk with people for the first time and kind of look at that overall picture, when folks come into the office and sort of wonder if they're on track, oftentimes they're actually more on track than they think they are. And I think that's really then what the second step of our 3-step program is all about. Is it's important to sit down and go through that assessment, really get a handle on where you are, because oftentimes when folks come in thinking that they might be behind or lost, they're really not when you start kind of adding it all up and really putting that picture down in black and white on paper. So we certainly encourage folks to take advantage of that, as we do and have been for the past 40 years. All of our consultations at Nelson Financial Planning are done absolutely free of charge. So make sure you check out our website to request your free consultation. And then lastly, we said it was a 3-step program. So number 1, start with something, anything, do it today. Number 2, do a financial assessment, figure out where you really are. And then number 3, create a plan. Create a budget, start tracking things. That certainly is crucial in order to really get a handle on money that's coming in and money that's going out. Make sure you're taking advantage of the pay yourself first concept, right? That means that you're making savings, you're making investing a priority right from the very beginning. And then lastly, check your investment allocation. That also is crucially important because you want to make sure you're not just sitting in cash, not making a whole lot of interest one way or the other. If these are retirement dollars, then you probably want to have them positioned for growth as well. So that's your 3 steps in the 3-step program if you're feeling in that you are behind on your preparations for retirement. With that, we're going to take a break here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. So another packed show here on Dollars and Cents of solid information after a sort of hurricane week here in Central Florida. I think the nicest thing about it, if there is a silver lining, is it's really made the commute on Thursday very easy. A lot less traffic out there. But certainly the purpose of the show is to help educate you, as we have been for now almost 40 years here on the program. Obviously, Nelson Financial Planning has hit that 40th anniversary, and we certainly appreciate the continued trust and loyalty and support of our listening audience, particularly on the various radio stations that we air this program on, along with our podcast channels as well. Those weren't around 40 years ago, but they are now. And many of our listeners catch the program through our podcast channels or even our YouTube channel as well. So make sure you check us out. Any trouble finding us, go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com. So let's recap sort of where we are for this week's program. And I think first and foremost, to really be aware of what some are calling this maturity tsunami. These numbers are pretty staggering when you start to really look at what they are and what's going to be happening over the course of the next 12 months. A record $2.5 trillion of CDs are going to be maturing over the course of the next few months. That maturity concept, when you're using an investment that has a specific time period associated with it, really does highlight the concept of a reinvestment risk, right? And so what a reinvestment risk is from an investment perspective is that I've got an investment, it's got a rate of X. When it comes time then for that time period to end, and then I go back into effectively into the same type of investment product, well, if the rate is lower, and obviously with the Fed cutting interest rates as much as they did a couple weeks ago, then the rate's going to be lower than what it was a year ago. Now you're ultimately being forced into accepting less of a return. That's the very concept of reinvestment risk. So given that you've got all of these CDs, all this money, $2.5 trillion in CDs that's ultimately maturing, you may want to take a minute and not be asleep at the wallet, so to speak, because oftentimes what happens is when these CDs mature, they just automatically roll into a similar type of CD, but not at the same rate. You go into that at the rates based on where things are currently. And obviously now it's less. And so what you really need to be doing is really looking at opportunities right now. If it's cash money and money that you always want to make sure is secure, then you still do have to stay on kind of that savings account CD. But maybe it's a money market, maybe it's a high yield savings account, maybe there's some other options depending upon when you need that money. What it also does is it should open up a conversation in your mind about, do I really need this much in my emergency savings? Do I really need this much cash? Maybe some of the investment themes that we were talking about on last week's program, maybe there's an opportunity for some of that cash to follow some of those investment themes, like owning dividend-paying companies, or maybe having a larger portion of your portfolio on the international side of things. Certainly, there might be some opportunities that ultimately, if it's not money that you need within the next year or two, maybe you shouldn't be putting it back into a CD or a savings account. Maybe you should look at investing that over time. That's always one of the great things that we suggest for people, is that if you've got a chunk of cash and you're trying to figure out how to get it invested, or trying to figure out how to get a better investment return on that, particularly if you're facing this reinvestment risk, then ultimately one of the things that you can do, rather than make it sort of an all or nothing kind of decision, is ultimately think of it as, I'm going to invest this money over the course of the next 12 months, so that each and every month you wind up putting in a little bit, or 1/12 of that amount that ultimately you want to invest. Now, that's not obviously a perfect strategy, but what that does do is that does help to really smooth out some of the short-term volatility that can happen in the market. So make sure you think about that strategy as well. To the extent that you're facing this reinvestment risk issue and you've got a CD that's maturing, think about those types of concepts as well. And sadly, we broke the news. Prepare for more complicated taxes. Already today, individuals and businesses spend nearly 8 billion hours on compliance time, and over $130 billion in just compliance costs. Past 25 years, tax code grown by about 40% to about 4 million words. Wish I could say that it's going to get simpler. It's probably not. And expect a lot of changes, particularly over the course of the next year. A lot of conversation, obviously, among the two major political candidates, involving things like business credits, child tax credits, retirement credits, all child tax credits. All of those are certainly being talked about. To claim any of those credits, there's a process for that, which continues to make the tax code complicated. The other biggie is, don't forget, all those tax rates from 2017, they're all going to expire at the end of next year. So expect to see a lot of conversation on that. Unfortunately, it's not going to be to simplify things. Now more than ever, we would recommend to seek out professional guidance, particularly as it relates to your taxes. If we think about what's going to be a dramatically changing landscape over the course of the next year or so, if you really just want a fundamental understanding of taxes and how that works, we encourage you to check out our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. We wrote chapter 16 of that book, really to give folks a fundamental understanding of kind of how the mystery of the taxes work. It's the income, and it's deductions, and it's personal exemptions, and it's credits, and all of those kinds of things. The chapter goes through each one of those items and ultimately helps you to get a better perspective on what it is that your taxes are all about. And then lastly, don't forget to sign up for our 3-step program, right? We have a 3-step program that's probably applicable to most people out there these days, particularly when you look at some of the statistics, courtesy of Vanguard. If you look at that age group that is sort of quote unquote middle age, 45 to 54, nice to know I'm on the outer edge of that. I'm not sure where I go from here. The average balance for folks in that age range is $60,000, the average balance in their qualified employer plan. That's not a lot. So we give you 3 distinct ways in which to sort of get on track. First was to just do something. Start today, do something, anything. Make sure you're doing the match. Make sure maybe you're taking advantage of pre-tax savings on those employer plans to help fund some of the tax savings that you're able to do in and of itself. Some of the savings for retirement, because you do it on a pre-tax basis, you're getting a tax savings. And so then you can turn around and use that tax savings to help offset the dollars that were going into that retirement account. So that's number one. Number two, make sure you do a financial assessment. Where are you really? Check it out. What do you own? What do you owe? How much money coming in? How much money going out? That's our balance sheet and income statement analysis. You typically hear those words with companies, but the same concept definitely applies to individuals as well. So make sure you're kind of taking a look at that analysis. And then lastly, sort of create a plan. Start a budget. Maybe that involves tracking. Maybe that involves paying yourself first. The reality is also, one of the things that we were mentioning was make sure you check your investment allocation. All too often, folks find that a portion of their portfolio might be sitting in cash, that if that's a retirement account, you're still 10 years away from retiring. There really doesn't need to be a cash component in there. The retirement account, especially if we've got a 10-year perspective, should really be positioned for growth. And then lastly, if we're going to add sort of a fourth step to the three-step program, which kind of undermines the whole description of the program itself, but come visit us. We certainly give folks an opportunity to come on in free of charge, no obligation consultations. When you're there, you can pick up a free copy of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, as well. Important to get that perspective along the way. So make sure you check us out on our website at nelsonfinancialplanning.com. With that, we'll wrap it on up and get on out of here. This has been Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning.